It started with the sound of my son's muffled cries echoing down the hallway. I dropped the laundry basket the second I heard it. The house had that thick summer still heat where every noise sticks to the walls. My sister Claire had been watching him while I folded clothes in the next room. That was the deal. She'd help for 15 minutes while pretending she was doing me a favor. When I reached the doorway, my brain refused to make sense of what I saw. My son, 8 years old, small, pale, terrified, was hanging upside down by his ankles. A belt looped around his legs, hooked over the closet bar. His t-shirt had fallen toward his face. His little arms were flailing. Claire was standing there holding her phone, laughing. "Clara," I shouted, my voice cracking. "What the hell are you doing?" She rolled her eyes. "Relax. I'm teaching him discipline. He moves too slow. Maybe gravity will fix that." I rushed forward and tried to untie the belt. My hands shook so badly I could barely unbuckle it. My son whimpered, trying not to cry, like he already knew showing emotion would only make it worse. When his feet hit the floor, he collapsed into my arms, sobbing quietly. His hair was sticking to his forehead with sweat. I turned to Claire. "You're sick," I said. She shrugged, the smirk glued to her face. "Mom says you're too soft. Speed comes from fear." Her words, not mine. I froze. That phrase, "speed comes from fear." It was one my mother used years ago when I hesitated while cleaning, or hesitated to answer her fast enough. She'd slap the table and repeat it like a joke that made her proud. Before I could respond, my parents walked in from the porch. My dad's face was calm, almost amused, like he'd walked into a sitcom. "What's all this noise?" I pointed at Claire. She hung my son upside down with a belt. Mom raised an eyebrow, then looked at my son. "He's fine. You're always so dramatic." "Dramatic?" I whispered. "He could have gotten hurt." Dad chuckled, leaning against the doorway. "Maybe that'll teach him to move faster. You baby that boy too much. Speed comes from fear. You know that, don't you?" I felt my whole body go cold. My mother's tone turned sharp, clipped with mockery. "We raised you that way, and look how well you turned out. You're just too emotional." Claire snorted, grabbing her phone off the dresser. "He deserved it. He's slow, lazy, just like his mom." I pressed my son's head against my chest. He was trembling, whispering, "Mom, I didn't mean to be slow." I kissed the top of his head. "You did nothing wrong." Mom's laugh sliced through the air. "See, that's your problem. You protect weakness. Maybe you should have been tougher like Claire. She doesn't need anyone." That was the moment something in me cracked. Not loud, not visible, but internal. A hairline fracture in the place where hope used to live. I took my son by the hand and left the room. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just closed the door. But their laughter followed me down the hall. Dinner that night felt like sitting at a table with strangers who wore the faces of my family. My parents chatted with Claire about her new job, praising her confidence, her drive, her success. Every sentence was a weapon wrapped in compliments. "You should learn from your sister," Dad said, stabbing his fork into the roast chicken. "She doesn't hide behind excuses." Mom added, "Maybe if you stopped acting like a victim, you wouldn't have a son who cries every time someone raises their voice." My son sat beside me, small and silent, pushing his peas around the plate. His eyes looked swollen. I whispered, "Eat something." But he just shook his head. Then Claire leaned over with a grin. "You know, he's fine now. Maybe I should hang him again tomorrow. See if he moves faster next time." The fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. No one blinked. They just kept eating. Mom sighed. "You see, you can't take a joke." That was their favorite excuse. Every cruelty was a joke. Every humiliation was character building. After dinner, I found my son curled up on his bed clutching his stuffed fox. His small voice broke when he said, Grandma said I need to be faster or I'll end up useless. I sat beside him and brushed his hair back. You're perfect, I said, but my throat burned. I couldn't let him grow up thinking this was normal. From the hallway, I heard my parents talking. She's overreacting again, Mom said. She always does, Dad replied. Maybe we were too lenient with her. Claire laughed softly. She'll calm down once she remembers she has nowhere else to go. They were right. I was still living in their house. After my divorce, I had nowhere else to take my son. Every dollar I earned went toward keeping us afloat. I thought moving in temporarily would buy time to save money. Instead, it bought me humiliation. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling, listening to the creak of footsteps in the distant hum of my mother's television. My son's soft breathing beside me was the only thing keeping me steady. At sunrise, I made breakfast. My hands moved automatically. Eggs, toast, milk. When I placed a plate in front of my son, Mom walked in yawning. Don't feed him before chores, she said. He didn't earn it. I looked at her, really looked at her. The cold confidence in her eyes, the small, satisfied smile. He's a child, I said quietly. She waved a hand. You were scrubbing floors by his age. Maybe that's why you turned out so ungrateful. Claire came downstairs, hair perfectly styled, smirking at my silence. Don't worry, Mom. I'll handle her. She just needs a reminder of who's in charge here. I didn't answer. I just took my son's hand and walked him outside. The morning air smelled like wet grass. He looked up at me, his small face still unsure. Are we leaving? He asked. Not yet, I said, but soon. That was the first time I meant it. The rest of the day was a blur of whispers and sideways glances. My parents talked about me like I wasn't there, calling me fragile, ungrateful, emotional. Claire played the golden child, bragging about her job interviews and pretending to comfort Mom while twisting every knife deeper. By evening, they'd planned another family dinner. I stayed in my room instead. I could hear laughter from downstairs, the sound of plates clinking, chairs scraping. Then Mom's voice drifted up the stairs. If she doesn't want to join us, she can eat cold leftovers. Maybe fear will teach her manners. Speed comes from fear. Claire mimicked, and they all laughed. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked hollow, pale, exhausted. But there was something new behind my eyes, something sharp. That was the night I decided they were going to learn exactly what fear felt like. Not the kind they used to control me, the kind that comes from losing everything you thought you owned. I tucked my son in, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "It's going to end soon." He blinked up at me, confused but trusting. "Will it be okay, Mom?" I nodded. Better than okay. And as I turned off the light, the laughter downstairs echoed again. Unaware that by the time the sun rose again, their comfortable little world would start to crumble piece by piece. When morning came, the house smelled like burnt toast and perfume. Claire was sitting at the kitchen table painting her nails while my mom scrolled on her phone. Dad was outside yelling at the gardener about sloppy edges. Everything looked normal. So normal it made my skin crawl. My son stood behind me, clutching my sleeve. He refused to go near them now. I poured him some cereal quietly, pretending the tremor in my hand was just from being tired. Mom didn't look up. "If you're staying under this roof, you'll follow our rules," she said flatly. "And your boy needs to learn discipline. No more tantrums. No more laziness." Claire smirked. "Maybe we should hang you next time, huh, kiddo?" I felt his small body tense beside me. I turned to her slowly. "Say that again." She raised an eyebrow. "What? Can't take a joke?" Mom sighed. "God, you're so sensitive. You act like the world's out to get you. You should thank your sister. She's trying to toughen the boy up." The cereal spoon slipped from my hand. The clink it made on the bowl was tiny, but it echoed like thunder in my head. I didn't shout. I didn't even blink. I just looked at them. All of them, and realized there was nothing human left in that room but me and my child. That night, I began packing small things. Quietly, slowly, his school books, my documents, a few clothes. I kept my son in the loop in whispers. "Don't say a word," I told him. "Not even to Grandma. Especially not to Aunt Claire." He nodded. His little voice shook when he said, "Will they be mad?" "They'll be confused," I said. "Then scared." That's enough. The next day, I called work. I told my manager I needed extra hours, anything that could get me away faster. Then I spent hours in silence, cleaning their house like always, because I knew the performance mattered. They needed to believe I was still obedient. But inside, the shift was done. I no longer flinched when they mocked me. I no longer cried when they dismissed me. Every insult they threw was fuel. Every laugh was a countdown. That evening, as Claire bragged at dinner about a promotion she hadn't earned, I smiled. I'd already made my calls to the company, where she'd lied on her application, to the landlord who didn't know she'd been subletting illegally. Small truths released at the right time can burn deeper than lies. The company she bragged about owning turned its back on her overnight. Mom noticed the calm in my face. "What are you smiling about?" she asked. "Nothing," I said softly, "just thinking how fast things change." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up, taking my son's hand. "You'll see." That was the first night I left the dinner table without their permission. They didn't know it yet, but that was the last night they'd ever have control over me. When I tucked my son into bed, he whispered, "Did we win?" "Not yet," I said, "but we've already stopped losing." And for the first time, I slept without fear. 3 weeks later, the house sounded different. The laughter was gone. The arguments weren't about me anymore. They were about money, about jobs, about things they'd always hidden from each other, until I stopped being their common enemy. I'd moved out quietly, leaving before dawn. My son and I took only what we needed. They woke up to silence, to an empty room where my things used to be, and a note that simply said, "Don't call." They didn't believe it at first. The messages came for days. Demands, guilt trips, fake concern. "Stop being childish. Bring the boy for Sunday dinner. You owe us gratitude." I read them once, then blocked every number. I'd rented a small apartment near my job, barely furnished, but clean, safe, and quiet. My son slept through the night for the first time in months. I started saving every penny, building a world where no one could reach us. But I didn't forget what they'd done. I didn't forgive it either. Claire was the first to feel the ground shift. Her promotion disappeared after a background check revealed the fake credentials she'd boasted about. I hadn't needed to lie, just deliver her own words to the right ears. The company she bragged about owning turned its back on her overnight. 2 weeks later, I heard from an old neighbor that my parents' mortgage renewal had been denied. The house they lorded over everyone. The symbol of their control was suddenly too heavy to keep. The whispers spread fast in the neighborhood. The perfect family image cracked. I didn't show up. I didn't gloat. I didn't send a single message. Silence did the work for me. One evening, as my son and I walked home from the park, I saw their car parked across the street from our building. My mother sat in the passenger seat, eyes red, while Dad stared straight ahead, gripping the wheel. Claire wasn't there. My phone buzzed. Private number calling. I didn't pick up. We climbed the stairs to our small apartment. My son looked out the window, saw their car still idling in the dark. "Are they here to say sorry?" he asked softly. "No," I said. "They are here because they lost someone to control." He tilted his head. "Us." I smiled faintly. "No, themselves." Outside, the car engine finally shut off. A knock came at the door. 3 slow taps, the kind my mom used to do before barging in. I let it echo through the hallway, then another. Knock, sharper, desperate. I stood there, one hand on the doorknob, breathing steady. My son watched me quietly, waiting. Then I stepped back. "We don't open the door for noise anymore," I said. He nodded, climbed onto the couch, and turned on the small lamp beside him. The soft yellow light filled the room, warm and still. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing there, their faces pale, their mouths moving. I couldn't hear their words. For the first time in my life, their voices didn't reach me. They left after a few minutes. The hallway went silent. I tucked my son into bed that night, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. He was asleep within minutes, safe in his dreams. I sat by the window looking at the stars through the thin curtains, the reflection of my own face barely visible in the glass. I thought of the words they used to repeat. Speed comes from fear. They were right. Fear can make you move fast, but peace makes you unstoppable. When the phone rang again in the middle of the night, I didn't pick up.